How will the family's internal tensions affect Dan's understanding of his identity as a werewolf? As Eva and Liam prepare to reveal the family's secret to their son, will Dan accept the truth about his father's transformation? If you want to know how Dan copes with the family's secrets, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. 20. A lesson for the generation. What do you think, Eva? Alpha Blake asked expectantly. They were all staring at me, waiting for my reply. I looked around the table nervously. It's not like I wasn't paying attention to the two pair of mates bickering, but what did they want me to do about it? How is that even a topic to fight over? We want to be there when Dan watches Liam shift. Do you think it'll be too much for him to handle? Evan made the face that he used to make when he wanted me to share my ice cream with him. We don't want to scare the poor kid with our overcharged up energy, Emma said. Without giving me a chance to open my mouth, let it be a family thing for them. We are not That's right, you people can show him your wolves when he's comfortable with his parents' wolves. Luna Alexandra cut me off. Seriously, why ask me a question when you won't let me answer? And we're not an effing family. I glare at Emma, who doesn't even bother to give me a second glance. Evan grumbled. Alpha Blake turned to his food, disheartened. The women of this family were scary, and they surely had their husbands wrapped around their fingers. I looked at Liam. He shrugged and went back to feeding Dan. He was looking equally out of place. I should do that too. Ignore the loud people at the table. So it's decided. Emma clapped her hands together, looking a bit too excited for something she has no business with. I look at her warily. Eva and Alpha are going to take Dan to the woods today. She turned to me. You guys can take Dan for a walk along the lake in the evening. Yes. That will be good for my little baby here, Luna declared happily, pinching Dan's cheek. Ready? Liam asked Dan, who in turn grabbed bunch of Liam's hair tightly in his little hands. Yes, Daddy. Go, Dan yelled, like a commander would march his horse into the battle. The only difference was that instead of horseback, he was sitting on Liam's shoulder and was using Liam's hair as a rein. Liam was here to carry Dan to the lake. I was carrying a backpack full of essentials. We don't know what Dan's reaction will be, so we want to make sure we have everything in case of emergency. Liam looked at me for a moment before charging into the forest. I followed. The sun was still sitting comfortably in the horizon. It took us about 15 minutes to reach the clearing. We slowed down when the lake came into view. Dan was giggling and laughing throughout the journey. Something tells me he'll love patrolling once he comes of age. Liam put him down at the edge of the forest. He trotted away as soon as he was out of Liam's grasp. We followed him leisurely. Mommy picnic. Dan looked eager. Yes, I said, putting my bag down. Should we spread the mat? Tent? He asked. No tent. We're not staying overnight, I explained. He looks well acquainted with camping. Liam smiled at Dan. Yes, I replied, watching Dan go through the bag like a pro. We used to take him camping on weekends sometimes. He loves it. He cleared his throat and sat down with Dan. So, shall we start setting up the picnic, buddy? Yes, Dan jumped up and down. At your service, Sir. Liam gestured with his invisible hat. Once the mat was placed and the picnic was set appropriately, Dan was settled comfortably in the middle of the arrangement. How do you want to do it? Liam asked softly. I was thinking of sitting here with him. You should probably start from a distance. He nodded. Hey buddy, Dan looked up from the wolf toy he was playing with. Let's do something fun. How about I show you the bigger version of that thing? Yeah. Good going with that thing. I rolled my eyes at him. I sat down next to Dan and pulled him on my lap. You remember what Grandpa taught you about our wolves, baby? He nodded. Do you want to see them? He didn't respond for a while. I was starting to panic, but soon I heard a small okay. Are you sure? He nodded. All right. Let's see what Daddy looks like. I grinned and tickled a laugh out of him. Liam smiled and started walking backwards. Here? He asked. I motioned him with my hand to keep moving. Stop, that much distance seemed fine. Liam stopped. What's Daddy doing? Dan asked, confused as Liam started stripping. You need to get out of your clothes before shifting, I explained. You don't want to tear down your favorite dress, do you? He nodded fervently. I kept on looking at Dan, giving some privacy to Liam. I could see Dan's expression changing slowly as Liam shifted in front of him. He suddenly turned in my lap and hugged me tight. I looked up to see Liam's wolf walking towards us. I stopped him with my hand. He halted, his anxious eyes traveling back and forth between me and Dan. It's Daddy, baby. I ran my fingers through Dan's hair. Don't you want to play with him? He shook his head and looked up Uncle Evan. He whispered he remembers. My eyes darted to Liam. Daddy loves you. He won't hurt you. He still refused to bulge. He didn't seem to be afraid of Liam but recognizes the wolf from the day with Evan. Maybe I should have shifted before Liam. But Mommy wants to play with Daddy. I tried to take a different approach. Would you like to watch? He remained silent. I softly put him on the mat and stood up. I gave him an encouraging smile. He looked back with apprehension. I took a few steps away from the mat and sat down on my knees. I looked at Liam, asking him to come to me. He slowly started walking towards me. No. Mommy, Dan yelled, it's going to be fine, baby. Daddy won't harm Mommy. I turned to look at Liam, who was now towering over me. He was huge. I had to tilt my head upwards to look at his face. For a moment, when my eyes met his, I forgot why we were here. His dark eyes were fixed on me, and I felt my entire body shiver under his intense gaze. Shaking the nervousness off me, I moved my hands to cup his face. He leaned towards my touch, rubbing his face against my hand. That was so un-Liam-like. I grinned and turned to Dan. He looked curious. See? I told him Dad's not scary at all. I ran a hand over Liam's fur. Isn't he cute? Liam glared at me. Okay, maybe the big bad wolf doesn't like being called cute. Dan looked almost tempted, so I nudged Liam towards him. I felt the loss of warmth as soon as he moved away. My body forced me to move with him. Liam stood at the edge of the mat, giving Dan the space to decide the next step. After looking at Liam for almost a minute with wide eyes, Dan finally stood up. He took a few steps cautiously and put his palm forward. Liam slowly rubbed his nose on Dan's awaiting hand and moved back. Confused, Dan looked at his palm, examining it. He then took a few more steps towards Liam. This time when Liam rubbed his nose against his palm, he giggled. I can't explain the warmth that spread through my heart when I watched them play. It was surreal. They were soon rolling on the ground with Dan wrapped securely in Liam's huge furry body. Okay boys, time for a ride, I said, walking towards them. I picked Dan up and placed him on Liam's back. He quickly wrapped both his arms around Liam and held on to his fur. Liam stood up. Whoa. Dan yelled, awesome, Daddy. Liam shook the dirt off his fur. He let out an excited howl before taking off. By the time they returned, Dan's face was all red and hot. He was dripped in sweat. He was still screaming and giggling for more. Goddess. I helped him off. Liam, you need to get out of these clothes like right now. I placed him on the mat, took his wet clothes off, dried him with a towel and got him into clothes that I packed from home. Liam was sitting beside Dan and watching us. I think we should get going. The sun won't stay up for more than an hour. I turned to Liam once I was done with Dan. He shook his head and gave me a pointed look. What? He rolled his eyes. You can just shift and tell me. You know, he raised a paw and pointed towards me and then rubbed that paw on his other paw. Nope. Still nothing. I shook my head. He let out a low, frustrated growl. Well, I'm sorry that I'm not good at playing dumb charades with a wolf. I almost had a heart attack when he started pulling the sleeve of my shirt with his teeth. What the EFF are you doing? He glared at me and then pointed towards Dan. Sorry. I didn't say the word though. He snorted. Can I just forget for a minute that he's my alpha and kill him, please? He hopelessly looked around before his gaze landed on a piece of twig. You should have thought of that earlier. I bit back. He picked that twig up with his teeth and wrote shift on the ground. I read the word out loud and then looked at him confused. Why? He pointed at Dan, who was looking equally confused at our antics. Oh, I need to show him my wolf too. He nodded. Stay with him, I said as I got up to move into the forest. He moved close to Dan, who snuggled into his fur. Dan, get ready to see how stunning your mommy is, I yelled as I ran into the forest. I could hear Liam snort again. I hope he chokes on his food today. They were both staring at me as I made my way back. My wolf was happy at the attention she was getting. I sat down next to Dan on the other side of Liam. Mommy, Dan said. Amazement clearly floating in his striking green eyes. I saw you in my dream, he recalled. I nodded and nudged him playfully in his stomach. He giggled and leaned into me. He hugged me, spreading his little arms as far as he could. You ale so plenty, Mommy, I beamed. This has to be the best compliment I have ever received and will ever receive. Nothing can ever beat it. I wrapped my neck around Dan and licked him in joy. Pretty. My eyes flickered to Liam instantly. I forgot that we could talk to each other. I am not a part of the patrol team, so obviously I never had to talk to the alpha in my wolf form. He'll get there. He's 3, I countered. Almost for Liam reminded. I hate it when he's right. Dan turns 4 next month. So what am I supposed to do about it? I asked, frustrated. Let me handle it, he said authoritatively. God help my poor kid. It was my turn to roll my eyes. You know, just because he's your son doesn't mean you have to train him to be as perfect and boring as you were at his age. He raised a brow. You weren't born when I was his age. How would you know what I was like at his age? I glared at him and turned to focus on Dan. It wasn't because I was losing. It was simply pointless arguing with that infuriating I'm always right man. We played with Dan until the sun was no longer in sight. He was so happy. It was a day well lived. Yes, I'll make sure he's there this time. I promise. I tried to persuade the woman on the other end. I had no idea that he ditched out of the previous arrangement. That was so embarrassing for my client, Miss Taylor. I'm really sorry. I'll personally monitor him this time. Can you please convince her to meet him just this once? We will have to fix a date with another client this time, she said, exasperated. Thank you. I was grateful for her dedication. Although I pay her for her work, it's always nice to see someone work so hard. I yelled in frustration as soon as I put the phone down. I'm going to chew him raw today. I almost dug a hole in my phone as I dialed him. Yes, ma'am. I took a deep breath. Last Friday, 6 p.m. Where were you? I spit out. A long silence answered me. I was with this beautiful girl I bumped into on my way to the date you set me up for. She was so beautiful that by the time I looked away it was already midnight. The humor laced in his voice clearly indicated that he was enjoying fooling me. I'll be there with you this Friday when you bump into that so beautiful girl again, I replied. No. I thought it was a one-time thing, he whined. I told you it was a 10-time thing. You have to meet new people. Ray, I'm meeting new people every day. Sure. Friday. I'll be there. I'll personally escort you. Will you sit through the date with me? I'll be watching. So, don't for a second think of repeating your stupid tricks, I threatened. But I really did meet this awesome girl, he started. I'll be there on Friday. Let's have a look at her too, I challenged. I knew very well of this non-existent girl. Fine, he grumbled. What's going on here? I asked my next-door neighbor. It was late in the afternoon. I was returning from work. People were gathered at the gate of the house opposite to mine, blocking my gateway as well. Their son brought his girlfriend home last night at his sister's 16th birthday party. Today, once all the guests left, they started blasting him, she whispered. I did attend the party. That made me curious, so. What's wrong with him bringing his girlfriend home? She's not his mate, she said. So, am I supposed to get the entire story from just a sentence? Oh dear. Of course you wouldn't know. She patted my back. You know, the circumstances in which our alpha's wife died and all that happened before and after that. Everyone in the pack is really scared of not respecting the mating bond enough. They think it's the moon goddess's way of teaching this generation a lesson. With the alpha as an example, I held onto the pillar of my gate for support. My knees were giving away as my heartbeat paced up. Another woman next to us spoke up. It's not just our pack. The story has reached the neighboring packs as well. Parents are keeping stricter eyes on their children. No one wants to face the wrath of the moon goddess. But she died because of the complications in her pregnancy. She was a human, I managed to argue. There are other human mates of wolves who give birth to healthy pups. My neighbor was a kind woman, and it felt strange that she would cater to such rumors. Of course, the other day I told them that even you gave birth to Alpha's pup. But they argued that yours was an unavoidable circumstance, and because the Alpha didn't give you his heart, you were saved. I couldn't hold back anymore. I felt a lone tear escape my eyes. Oh, sweetheart, don't cry. What happened to our poor Alpha was really unfortunate. I could no longer hear what she was saying as I rushed past her and others into the forest. My feet didn't stop until I reached the familiar mountain top. I yelled and growled at the top of my voice, calling for him until there was no more energy left in me. My knees gave away and I fell down on the ground. The tears, however, didn't stop even as I gasped for air. I don't know how long I sat there until I felt him shake me violently. I looked up slowly into his worried eyes. What's wrong? He asked. Did I kill her? I whispered. 21. Wishes that are easily granted. He stared at me, confused. Answer me, damn it, I yelled through my tears. Am I the reason she's dead? Did the goddess take her away to make room for me? I felt nausea hitting me as I uttered those words. He loosened his grip on me. Who was it? He asked in a low, threatening voice. Doesn't matter, I shook my head. Did I do that to your wife? To your unborn child? I held on to his shoulder for support. How can I do that? To an innocent soul. His menacing glare stopped me. It was me, he said. I killed them, his voice devoid of emotions. How can you claim to kill someone in front of their murderer? He bit out. My heartbeat stopped at the cruelty in his voice. I wrote down her death the day I set my eyes on her. No one could have saved her from me, just like no one could save you from me. What do you mean? I breathed. He chuckled humorlessly. You wouldn't understand. The goddess has a strange relationship with me. She always gives me what I want. Always. He exhaled. I shouldn't have wanted her. Look what I've done to you. Look what you're facing because of my doings. You should be wary of me. He looked into my eyes. Stay away from me, even if I try to get close to you. My darkness is more powerful than your light. I might just consume you before you try to liberate me. I shuddered at the rawness in his eyes. He was gone in a blink. One way or the other. She's making me talk to strangers, Ray murmured under his breath, as he looked around the crowded street. He has been at work for 4 hours now, talked to 6 beautiful strangers, got slapped by one and yelled at by 2 others. The absurdity of his request wasn't unknown to him, but he was desperate here. He shivered at the thought of having to sit through 10 blind dates. Yes, he was going to give his ludicrous idea one last chance, he thought as his eyes zoomed on his target. She was sitting outside a CAF, her sharp face focused on the book in her hand. He stopped at a reasonable distance from her. A distance which will allow him to have a proper conversation but will also shield him from any possible attack. He learned it the hard way. Excuse me, he cleared his throat. Excuse me, miss, he called out again when the first time didn't generate any response. She looked up this time. He gave her a smile. She looked around confused before turning back to him with a pointed look. Me. Yes, hello, he smiled nervously. Can I talk to you for a minute? Sure, she nodded, poker-faced. Before that, I'll have to make sure you're not a minor. Her eyes narrowed and she ran a careful glance at his form. Well, minor or not, I'm a lawyer. She glared at him. So if what you are about to say has anything to do with harassment, be sure to bring your lawyer along. Oh, and I'm quite flattered that you felt the need to check on my age. With that, she went back to her book. He stood there, debating whether his words could land him in jail. Here he pushed his ID forward. She took it. Okay. Shoot, he took a deep breath and said, Will you gonna fake date to him? I didn't literally mean shoot, sorry, he blushed. Will you go on a fake date with me? He said, this time more confidently. A fake one? She asked after a long silence. He nodded. Why me? Because you are the textbook definition of beautiful. That's my criteria for the job, he said honestly. She looked at him thoughtfully while playing with his ID in her hand. And what do the textbooks say? Pardon. What do you mean by textbook beautiful? She explained, observing him carefully. Oh, he looked around nervously. You know, perfect face, doe eyes, sharp nose and all. Sit down, she pointed at the chair opposite to her. He widened his eyes at her offer. Was he finally getting somewhere? He has never been this embarrassed. Eva makes him do unthinkable things. He's a pretty normal guy otherwise. And what is your definition of beautiful? She asked. My definition? She nodded. He laughed awkwardly. I don't think I have a definition. You have a face then, she suggested. He looked at her, stunned. I guess. What did you tell her about this beautiful stranger you bumped into? His eyes widened. How do you know? She shrugged. So are you trying to test her love for you? No, he replied. He didn't prepare for someone to go into details. It felt weird. No. I'll have to go on 10 blind dates if I fail to produce that one beautiful girl I met on the street, he said, avoiding her question. Ouch. That's one horrible deal, she said, trying to hide that one stupid grin threatening to break out. So, will you consider it? He asked. Depends on what? My mood on the said day. Friday, he offered. Friday it is, she forwarded her hand. His ID loosely held between her fingers. Your business card. He rummaged through his pockets, hoping to find one. He doesn't belong to the category of people who would carry business cards even in their pajamas. While clumsily looking for the card, he realized 2 things, that she definitely did belong to the said category and that he had earlier in his haste, failed to notice the obvious details. Her sleek pony and perfectly designed getup definitely screamed of the fact that she deals in business cards. The first and the only thing he had noticed about her from afar was her perfect face. The ones he had read in English literature about. He prefers softer, milder faces. A face that makes you feel at home and reminds you of warmth. Yes, she was right, he didn't have a definition for beautiful. He has a face to it. Here he placed the loan card he dug up in her awaiting hand and took back his ID. He offered a smile to go with it. What can I do to thank you in return? He asked politely. I haven't agreed to it yet. She cocked a brow. Oh yes, he admitted. I'm sorry. What can you offer in return? She questioned back. Anything in my capacity. I'll have to think about it, she said, looking at him. But I'll have to know that beforehand. What if you end up helping me and I can't return the favor? She couldn't hold back her laughter this time. Don't worry. I won't ask for your life. She rose to depart. I have one last question. He too got up from his chair. Why are you helping me? I mean, I received a slap not too long ago. You know it's fun on a boring day. He stared at her, confused. She smirked. A lab mouse, Eva. I was hoping to talk about the gossips with Emma, but I couldn't find the voice to. How does he live listening to such cruel rumors about himself? Does he go through this every day? I couldn't hold back even for a few minutes. How did he not succumb in all these years? So how did it go? She asked. I looked up from my stupor. The other day, she explained, shifting, and Dan. You were trying to set us up. I accused you. Think I wouldn't notice that? I don't know what you're talking about, she said, quickly handing me the coffee mugs. Yes, you do. We were just worried about Dan. I don't want a repeat of that ever, Emma, I warned her. Why not? She turned to look at me. You can't stay in the same place forever. You'll have to start somewhere. I ignored her. You have to tell someone about how you feel. Anything, Emma said, tailing me to the sofa. And because I'm the only person who knows, why don't you tell me? Tell me how you feel about him. Do you despise him? Hate him? Nothing. I'm really not putting much thoughts into him. I sat down. She followed. You're doing that again, aren't you? Keeping everything bolted up and trying to solve your problems on your own. He's not a problem, Emma, he's not. Then why is your relationship with him so complicated? It's not complicated. He's Dan's father and that's it. It's as simple as that. He's a good man. He won't be a bad influence on my son. The complications you are talking about only arises when I try to see him as something more than that. And what are those complications? I took a deep breath. I am about to share my innermost demon with someone. It makes me feel naked. But she needs to know and stop pushing me towards him. I don't think I can get beyond his past to look at him for just the man he is. No matter how much I feel like melting into his arms when I'm around him, I can't help but feel so dirty and ugly when I look into the mirror later. I look at her, her face showed nothing but understanding, so I continue. There are two things. One, I know he's going to fall in love with me. That's no rocket science. I can see it coming. I'm his mate. He has no choice but to love me. I'm his easiest and safest choice. I'm his only choice. How do you think that makes me feel? She nodded but said nothing. Two, you know how they say that you can fight the woman in his arms but not the one in his memories. He will love me because he has no other choice. But he fell in love with her despite the whole world telling him not to. She was powerful enough to make him love her even when a part of him hated her. I've never seen her, but I can imagine how beautiful of a woman she must have been. She made an alpha rebel. You have no idea how small that makes me feel. I can't live like that, Emma. I can't live with him, knowing that I'll always be his second choice. I finished. I know how shallow my words made me look like, but no matter how much I deny, they are my thoughts and I haven't been able to get rid of them in a long time. Okay, she said. I waited for her to continue, but nothing came after that. That's it. You don't have any advice for me, I said sarcastically, like how I shouldn't have such thoughts. She smiled. They are the most natural thoughts, love. You are a strong woman, not a pushover. You should never be someone's second choice. If someone makes you feel that way, then he doesn't deserve you, mate or not. I can do nothing to take away your apprehensions. The only person who can change your thoughts is him. It depends on how much he loves you, how bad he wants you. We can only wait and see if he can win you over with his love. She held my hand and pulled me up. So let's not waste more of our heads on it. He should be the one doing the thinking, not you. If this is where you stand, then I definitely don't have any advice for you. You're doing well. She made it seem so easy. Was it that easy? Do I only have to wait and watch? What about me? How do I feel about him? Can I ever love him, just him? 22. Be my secret, Liam. I want more. Those words don't stop running all over my head as I look at her discreetly across the table. The breakfast table has become my happiest place to be. Sleep hasn't been kind to me over the years, but it has lately become my best friend. It just happened one day, suddenly. I was lulled to sleep by the thought of her smiling face at the breakfast table. It made me feel so complete, so at peace. The following morning, I cursed myself for daring to think about her. I avoided looking at her that day. But the same smile came back to me once again that night and the night after, and it soon became a habit. The guilt that came every morning after faded little by little until it was replaced by a strange boldness. A boldness that gave me permission to let my dreams breathe. I convinced myself that as long as I know my place in her life, as long as I don't put my thoughts to action, I'll be fine. I can allow my wolf to cheat a little. The problem is that I have come to realize that I can no longer lie and put all the blame on my wolf. When I see her, I no longer turn away. I take my time to drink in the shine in her midnight eyes, the streaks around them when something amuses her, the stretch that her lips travel when she's happy. When she leans into someone while having a conversation, I unconsciously move with her, trying to remember if she ever did that to me, lean into me when I talk to her. Her happiness is contagious, it makes want to be happy with her. When I watch her fuss over Evan's food habits, it makes me yearn for her concern. I've become greedy. I'm ashamed of it. But the devil inside me even has arguments to counter my shame these days. I laugh at how ignorant I was when I thought that I could bring her this close to me and still resist the temptation to make her mine. The restraint within me is slowly breaking. It's a matter of time before my selfish desires takes over my rational senses. I can see it coming. Yet I'm doing nothing to stop it. What if I wasn't this empty? What if I had someone to love, a family? Would she still have this effect on me? Would I still want her this much? Who am I kidding? My son is a living proof of what would have happened had she stayed next to me. I knew I had many flaws, but infidelity wasn't one of them. That was until I met her. This craziness, I can't help but question the necessity of it. Why was it so important for the goddess to bind us to another person this badly? Yet every time I look at my mate, I can't help but thank her a million times for keeping me alive, for giving me another chance to look at the woman I thought I would never see again. Can Dan sleep over here tonight? She asked my mother. Really? Mom squealed like a child. She smiled, pushing the curtain of hair that keeps disturbing her behind shoulder. Yes. I have to go to the city. I'll be late. My curiosity lifted its head, but I kept my eyes focused on my plate. It's Friday already, Emma said the date. My head snapped up as my heart thudded hard. Her voice laced with mischief as she winked at my mate. What shocked me more was my mate's response to her. She shushed her, pointing a finger to her lips and a meaningful glare. Yes, she mouthed. I gripped my chair with all my force as I held on to the fork in my other hand as if my life depended on it. I just hope it has enough strength to bear my assault. My wolf was starting to flex its muscles inside me. A date? Evan yelled. You are going on a date with him. He has a name, Evan. Emma chided him. It's not a date, she said simultaneously. If it's not a date, why aren't you taking Dan with you? I bet that rat would love to see him. He doesn't seem to survive a week without seeing him. Evan. Mom glared. Don't interfere in her personal matter. She smiled at Eva meaningfully. She blushed. I'm just set. So what are you wearing today? Emma cut her off. My sister-in-law is an intelligent woman whom I have come to admire over the years. She is too good for my airhead brother, but I find her less and less tolerable these days. Eva shrugged. Work clothes. I won't be stopping to change after work. Are you kidding me? Emma whined. You should definitely take some time off to change, my mother said. I heard you girls brought some lovely dresses last time you went shopping. The blush on her face deepened to the color of my now boiling blood. Rubies, a disaster. She dug her face into her plate as she played with her fork. You can wear the blue. Emma begun. You still didn't answer Evan's question. I surprised myself and of course those around me. I'm sure Ray would love to meet Daniel, and of course a little change in environment won't harm Dan. I kicked myself mentally as soon as the words left my mouth. I know my face was turning red, no matter how much I tried to maintain the nonchalance. Her look was priceless. Her eyes widened at me as her mouth gasped open. Did she really forget that I was here while having a very elaborate discussion about her date? Something stirred in her eyes as her expression hardened. I kind of have some business that can't involve Dan. Ray will have to meet Dan another time, so she really is meeting him. Alone. She didn't even deny it. I nodded, more like force my head to move against my will. Excuse me, I put my fork down with as much civility as I could muster. I'm done. I have an early appointment. I'll be back for Daniel. I rose up and escaped with a curt nod at the table. My wolf was howling to be set free. Eva, I'm meeting Ray's date today. I had to put the blind dates on hold to see what or whom he's got to show me. But my mind wasn't focused on him today. The morning incident never left my mind even for a moment. I didn't know how to react. He was jealous. He has been jealous before, but this was the first time he was so vocal and assertive about it. He is close, very close to the day I dread. I'm not ready for that. I don't want to be the one to sort out the mess after him. I want him to hold his own reins, control himself even if it hurts him. I'll have to have a proper talk with him. If this is the beginning, I'll have to stop it now. He made a promise and he should be responsible towards it. Thank Goddess Luna saved me the embarrassment when Alpha Blake asked about Liam's behavior. He has been talking about this critically ill patient of his. I think he's afraid he won't be able to spend time with Dan today, she explained. Was that the reason? Where is she? I shake my leg impatiently under the table as I glare at Ray. She'll be here, he said, looking around nervously. I rolled my eyes. Of course she will, only if she is real. She's late then, I point at my watch. 15 minutes. 13, he countered. I glared. That's beyond. I started. I'm sorry, a crisp voice cut me off. I'm terribly late. I was shocked at what I saw in front of me, for more reasons than one. You must be Eva, she smiled at me. Her smile was just like the rest of her face, straight out of a fairy tale, only somehow colder. Hi, I'm Jean. A loud hiss escaped me as Ray kicked me under the table. I painfully took her hand. Hello, I managed. He really did manage to find the most beautiful one out there for the job. Ray told me about your apprehension, she said, sitting down next to Ray, watching me carefully. I returned the favor. I'm sorry you had to come to see me, I said in my most convincing voice. That must have been the most bizarre request you ever heard. Probably not, she mused out loud. So you guys bumped into each other, I asked. I listened in details about their awkward encounter, nodded where I needed to, smiled when I had to. I'm sorry, I said, I need to use the restroom. I smiled sweetly. Would you like to accompany me? I asked her. I was shocked at how promptly she stood up. Ray started to protest, but my glare shut him up. Where is she? He asked anxiously, shifting around his chair as she took her seat opposite to him. She shrugged, probably hiding in some corner and spying on us. He nodded in agreement. What did she say? Curiosity evident in his eyes. Nothing much. She wants us to continue with the evening. She surely loves the number 10 a lot, she replied. Nothing. I'm sorry you had to go through this, he said after a long pause, and thank you for helping me out. She nodded. So what do we do now? I don't know. What do you do to kill time? He smiled. I make deals, she said smoothly. Deals? Like what? He asked, interested. Like the one I'm about to make right now. His eyes turned confused. Your return favor. Did you forget it already? Of course not, he defended himself. So what can I do for you? He gave her his most courteous smile. Finish what she started. She gave him her trademark smirk. 10 dates, Eva. Should I pick Dan up now that I'm back earlier than I expected? I should probably let Luna have her day with him. She seemed so excited. I parked my car at my gate. I see a figure in the shadow as soon as I get out into the night. What are you doing here? I asked quickly before he could turn around and leave. I know the answer. Nothing, he said as he walked up to me. I was just passing by. No, you weren't, he started to protest. You were here to see whether I decided to spend the night with him or not, I bit out. He clenched his jaws. I don't understand why you are poking your nose into my personal business. Alpha, I emphasized on the last word. I thought people have the right to privacy in this pack. He looked up, his eyes shining dangerously. A long silence followed as we glare at each other. They do, his voice low, almost like a hiss. You don't. I did warn you beforehand that the other pack members would enjoy certain privileges that wouldn't be laid down for you. I couldn't believe he was doing this. I remember you apologizing in advance for it, I replied in a cold voice. He nodded, not leaving my gaze. Well, I'll get going then. Don't let them find out, I said in the same tone. I'll try, he said, looking away. It isn't enough. I lost my cool. He looked torn. Your trying isn't enough. Try harder. He opened his mouth, but I shut him up. This is what I want you to be for me at this moment, I said. You promised. You'll be what I need you to be, I reminded him. Be my secret, I challenged. 23. I remember a lot more than you can imagine. Need to talk. We'll be waiting. I look at the phone in my hand with disbelief as I furiously typed my reply. You left me hanging yesterday. Didn't show up the entire day today. What do you want now? Had I not left at that moment, I would have done something to upset you further. I'll give you your answer, I promise. I considered it for a while. He did look ready to kill when I told him off yesterday. I was scared he would do something that would immediately put my proposition to an end. But he just stood there clenching his jaws together. His hands fisted painfully as he glared at me. He then abruptly turned to vanish into the forest. "Can't leave Dan alone at home," I typed back. His reply took longer than I expected. "Can I come?" "Can he?" I never really asked him to not come in my house, but I never invited him either. "Will it change anything?" "Okay." I hesitated. "Make sure no one's around though." I felt stupid as soon as I pressed the send button. "Thank you," came his instant reply. "Hi," he said, looking around my living room. It's not like he has never seen it. He finalized the place, so of course he knows what it looks like. "Hi," I replied, leading him to the sofa. "Dan?" he asked, sitting down. "He's asleep." I took the seat opposite to him. "It's late," I pointed out. Yes, he ran his hand through his hair. "Sorry about that. So what do you want to talk about?" "I'll do that. I'll do all that it takes to keep our bond from becoming public," he said, looking straight at me. Maybe it's the habit cultivated at job, but even his compliance looks like intimidation. "I'll never let them associate you with me." I was about to thank him, but I can't do it alone. "What do you mean?" I asked, confused. "You'll have to help me," he said. "We can't do it without your help." I stared at him in disbelief. "What can I possibly do to help you? Warn me beforehand if you have things like your love life to discuss." I blushed. "I'll leave. Tell me things so that my wolf isn't surprised. Tell me when he plans on visiting. Just go easy on me, all right?" he sighed. It took me a while to process what he wanted me to do. I opened and closed my mouth, not finding words to form. So I simply nodded obediently. I had the urge to correct him about my love life, but I gritted my teeth to stop myself. It's better this way. 2 weeks passed by without any incident. It kind of felt stupid, but I warned him twice when Ray was visiting. He kept away. I kept my end of the deal and he his. It's Dan's 4th birthday in 2 weeks, and no surprise here that it's going to be huge. The alphas don't do anything half-hearted, especially if it's their grandson's 1st birthday with them. It's going to be wedding scale. I didn't get to voice my opinion much here. Every time I opened my mouth to protest, they sent me down on a guilt trip. Suit yourselves, huff. The only point I could get across was no extravagant gifts. They looked at me like little pleading puppies. But no, I can't deal with a spoilt kid. It's shopping day. Luna makes the plans. So here I am, sitting next to Liam in his car with Luna and Emma seated at the back. "We are going to the city." Emma pleaded that they were still not comfortable with sitting in the passenger seat next to Liam. Really? Can someone please teach these people the definition of irony? We kept a straight face, playing our parts really well. I could see the disappointment and confusion in Emma's face as she looked at Liam's expressions, or rather the lack of them. We shopped the afternoon away. After we were done with the basics, Luna turned to me. "Why don't you and Liam go get your gifts together?" she said, ignoring her son. "Why won't you come along?" I asked. "We are going to have a look at that section," she whispered in my ears. I blushed. "Do you absolutely have to do this now?" I pleaded. They both nodded in unison. "Fine," I said, dejected. Sure, this wasn't their way of getting us together. Luna has no clue. Can't be Emma's plan, right? I shrugged the thought off my mind as I walk away with Liam. We both pretend like the perfect stranger that we are. I bought lots of little things for Dan's everyday use and got them packed together. I know Ray already bought a bike for him, so that finishes off every essential item that Dan might need. Liam got him a piano. It will get delivered on the morning of the birthday. I protested, but he was adamant. He seemed to have put a lot of thoughts into his gift. Dan has of late got special fascination for Liam's piano. Liam is teaching him the basics and is also planning on hiring a piano teacher for him. "We are done, I guess." He looked at me. "Did we miss something?" "No. We should call them." I took my phone out. "Find out where they are." "Where are you?" I asked Emma. "We are done." I repeated Liam's words. "Oh, we kind of are in a situation here," she replied hesitantly. "What happened? Are you okay?" I tensed up. "Nothing serious," she instantly replied. "We think we lost our way. It'll take us some time to find you guys. Who gets lost in a mall, Emma?" "Stop lying." I narrowed my eyes at the phone. "We really are lost. I swear." "Tell me where you are," I said, looking at Liam. "We'll find you." He nodded in agreement. "No, don't do that. We are moving from one place to another. If you keep moving too, we'll never find each other. Let's meet at the CF in the ground floor." I grudgingly agreed. I conveyed it to Liam, who agreed innocently. Of course, he knew nothing of Emma's vicious plans. I found time to roll my eyes before following him into the CAF. So I tried to break the awkward silence. When are you planning to tell your family that you weren't actually going to drag me to the council? It has been on my mind for a while. I might as well ask him. He shrugged. Doesn't matter. I widened my eyes. Are you kidding me? He gave me a smile. I've done worse than lying about the council. Can't complain. But I was exasperated at his indifference. They are misunderstanding you. Aren't you hurt? He looked away. Why are you like this? I asked hopelessly. Why can't you express yourself better? You are not above everyone else, you know. You too need other people to survive. So, why is your communication skill so lacking? He looked amused. You noticed? Of course I did. A blind man would notice your awkwardness. I'm fine, he said. No, you're not. You should sometimes explain yourself to people. You live in a society with people having different ways of perceiving things. You can't always blame them and give up on them. That applies to your family as well. How would they know how you feel and why you do certain things if you don't explain it to them? Does it affect you that much? He asked. When people get me wrong. My wolf doesn't like it when people misunderstand you. I snapped. What about you? He looked intently. What kind of a person do you think I am? Me. I know exactly what I have to say. I don't try to understand you. I don't want to. He looked on silently for a while before letting out a sigh. Yet you seem to be the only one who understands me these days. We wouldn't be having this conversation otherwise. I quickly averted my gaze. I understand everyone. I shrugged nonchalantly. I think I chose the wrong profession. I should have been a counselor. His soft laughter forced me to look back. I have never seen him laugh like this. My stomach felt giddy as I stared at him in awe. Why did he have to have this effect on me? Why can't I for once feel what I want to feel? My wolf poked its sleepy head out and reminded me that we brought this happiness on his face and that she was proud. That in turn extracted a glare out of me. He stopped laughing, but a smile lingered around the corner of his mouth. It would have suited you. You would have been a veteran by now, he said. You started when you were 4, after all. What? How would you know that? I asked, confused. I happened to stumble into one of your very first sessions. He seemed to be reminiscing something. His eyes looked distant. I raised a brow in question, so he continued. You were sitting on our kitchen slab, watching my mother cook, I think. She was as usual fawning over you and crying over the absence of a daughter in her life. You obviously had a solution. I tried to remember, but nothing came. So what was my solution? I was way too curious to question the direction our conversation was moving. You told her that you once overheard your grandmother telling your mother that she was so happy to gain a daughter after your father married your mother. I could see the effort he was putting to stop the laughter bubbling in his throat. So you wanted to get my father married. Knew I could feel my face heat up. You're lying. He finally gave up and laughed, shaking his head along. I'm not. He composed himself. My mother told you that my father was already married, so that wasn't possible. Then, I could feel heads turn towards us as Liam continued to try and compose himself. You should be glad we aren't in the pack territory. I scowled at him. What would the pack people think if they saw their big bad alpha attract all the attention by laughing like a lunatic? He seemed to be pulled out of a trance. He looked around, composing himself like someone poured a bucket of ice-cold water on him. He looked confused and shocked at what he was doing. My heart tugged. Maybe I shouldn't have given him the reality check. So what happened next? I asked impatiently. He looked back at me. I can't describe the emotion in his eyes. It was almost like he was looking at me for the first time, like he couldn't believe his eyes. I snapped my fingers in front of him, not giving him time to think. Can you please finish what you started? Yes, he said, shaking his head. Where was I? I wanted to get your father married. Although I don't believe you. He smiled. My mother explained that it was impossible. He leaned over the table. So you decided to make me your next victim. I choked on my now cold coffee. He chuckled and passed me tissues. There is no way you remember that, I said after I composed myself. How can you remember something that I don't remember? Even I didn't know that I had it in my memory. But I can assure you that I remember a lot more than you can imagine, he said. Of course. How can I doubt your memory power? I rolled my eyes. I still don't believe you. He shook his head in defeat. So, are you going to sit down with your mother and talk to her? I asked. I'll think about it, he offered. Stop thinking and do something already. She is so anxious around you. You know she loves you, don't you? Don't push her further away from you. Tell her how you feel. Tell her that you're okay. She'll be happy to know that. One moment I was talking and the next, I felt the warmest pair of lips on me. My breath hitched. My eyes widened as I continued to stare up at his face so close to me. He was leaning over the table with his entire weight on the soft arms of my chair. Moments ticked by before he pulled away slightly to look at my face. He was so close that I could hear his heart hammering in his chest. I sat there agape as heat rushed up my face. His eyes swept over my face before meeting my wide ones. Beautiful, he whispered before dipping his head once again to take my lower lip between his. I found myself leaning into him, my ears ringing with the pounding of our hearts. His hand rose to hold my head in place as he deepened the kiss. A loud hoot broke my trance. I pushed him away. The unexpected push made him stumble as he missed his chair and landed on the floor with a thud. We looked at each other half-dazed but equally shocked. The silent CAF erupted in laughter and claps. I quickly grabbed my purse and rushed out. My legs quivered but I kept on walking. I stopped to compose myself only when Luna and Emma came to view. The journey back home was the most painful and awkward drive I ever endured. I was ready this time. I quickly grabbed the back seat once we got to the car. A dejected Emma sat next to me as Luna took the passenger seat. I could feel Liam's gaze on me throughout the ride. I didn't have the courage to look up, but I made sure that he knew how I felt every time he looked at that darn mirror to steal a glance. "I'm sorry we kept you waiting," Emma broke the silence, not looking sorry at all. I gave her my most frightening glare. Yes, Luna joined her. We got lost. "It's fine," was all I could muster up. They both soon started chatting excitedly about the party and the things they bought, pulling me into their conversation occasionally. I replied in monosyllables. Liam dropped us at my door. I didn't acknowledge him. We decided to dump all that we bought in one of the guest rooms and lock it up before Dan comes back. Sleep wasn't anywhere close to me when my phone beeped close to midnight. It was him. "I'm sorry I embarrassed you in public," I sighed as I put it away. I didn't have to guess who it was when it buzzed the second time. I wasn't thinking it read. Neither was I, 24. Jealous. "Liam," I took a deep breath before hesitantly knocking at her door. "I can do it," I kept on repeating to myself. "Who's it? She knows it's me. She's not going to make it easy for me, is she?" "It's me, Mom. Can I have a minute?" I tried controlling my anxious voice. Maybe this isn't such a good idea. I just realized that I haven't had a proper conversation with my mother in years. After Maya, she tried to console me, to share my pain, but I shut her off. I hated everyone and everything. I hated the pitiful looks they gave me. I was rude to her over and over again. That was the only way I thought would make her give up. They think I don't know how they try to be careful and conscious around me. Anything that made them happy, they wouldn't discuss it around me. They thought their happiness would make me sad, not realizing how their actions are hurting me more. Eva was probably right. How would they know what I want from them if I don't express myself? But I'm not good at talking. I never have been. How I wish she could do the talking for me. "Liam," my mother said, opening the door to her room. What a surprise. She looked genuinely taken aback. "Is something wrong?" "Great, my mother thinks the only reason I would talk to her is if something's wrong." "No," I said, scratching the back of my head. "I just wanted to talk to you, Mommy." She pulled me towards the couch by the window. "Of course. Love, tell me," looking intently at me. How are you?" I said awkwardly. She looked at me for a while, as if trying to make sense of what's happening. A bright smile lit up in her face. She relaxed. "Are we doing the hellos, and how are yous today?" she inquired. My mother is a beautiful woman, but she becomes the most beautiful one when she smiles like that. It takes away my pain and makes me warm. I missed this smile. "I'm glad I'm here today." I smiled. "I'm weird, right?" She pulled my face with both her hands. "Yes, you are," she grinned. "And that's your charm," she said, placing a sloppy kiss in my cheek. "You." "Mom," I wiped my cheek as soon as she let me go. "I'm 32, I reminded her. She shrugged. "You're my baby." "Your baby has a baby of his own." I rolled my eyes at her. Yes, her eyes shined with happiness, "and he's the most beautiful baby ever. You know, when you and Evan were little, I thought no one could ever be as handsome as my boys. But then my grandson came along and I realized how ugly you guys were as children." I held my hand to my chest. "Ouch, it's impossible to not be dramatic when you're around my mother. I think my father got his occasional streak of drama as a side effect of being around my mother for too long." "Don't beat yourself too much," she said. "He has you and Eva for parents." After all, my heart skipped a beat at her name. "It has become a habitual reaction these days. I don't know if you remember this, but you fell in love with her the moment you laid your eyes on her." She smiled distantly. I could feel heat rising up my face. "No, that's not true. I am not going to have this conversation with my mother." I'll be teased to death if I acknowledge it. You were too young to remember. She smiled. She was so beautiful that you wanted to exchange her for Evan. I should tell Evan how you rejected him. She grinned conspiratorially. You started playing more and more with Zach and Nick just to catch a glance of her. You would take your book and sit where Evan and she played. You continuously complained about how loud they were but never moved away. The Liam who kept himself locked in his room otherwise surely had other places he could read a book in peace. She laughed as I glared. You really were obsessed with her. I was. Mom, if you don't stop embarrassing me, I'll leave, I warned. Aw. Look at you blushing. I'm sorry, I'll shut up, okay, she promised. It's just that. She sighed. The way you used to hover over her, the way you looked at her. I don't know why I thought she'd be your. You know. She couldn't finish it. Mate, I whispered. She nodded, looking sad. That's why I wasn't much worried when you didn't find your mate. Is that why you begged me to stay just until Evan's birthday? A storm was brewing inside me. I could feel my head pounding. She nodded as she let her tears flow. I wrapped my arms around her, cuddling her. I feel so sorry for you, my child, she wept. I patted her back. I clenched my jaws tightly. I couldn't show her my emotions. My poor baby. Why wouldn't the goddess write some happiness next to your name? I would have happily taken her spot in death if I could. I fisted my hands, closed my eyes. I'm fine, Mom. I pried her away as I tried to look at her face. I have my son now. I've never been happier. She nodded, wiping her eyes. Yes, you are. She once again took my face between her hands and looked at me. I can see how happy you are. And I can't thank that beautiful girl enough for it. I know she suffered a lot because of that, and I haven't forgiven you yet. But I can't stop this selfish heart of a mother from being happy and thankful that it happened. She took my hands in her. Promise me, Liam, that you will take care of that girl. You can never repay her, but make sure she never goes through any hardship ever again. See to it that she never sheds another tear for anyone, let alone you. Don't be rude to her. She's your child's mother. Treat her like you treat your family. I would have laughed right now if I could. How do I explain to my mother that I can't treat her like I treat my family, because she's so much more than that? She's a part of my soul, albeit a part that I threw away. I smiled at my mother. I can't be rude to her. She's my first love, remember? I can't believe I'm saying this, even if it's to lighten my mother's mood. She slapped my arm. Stop making fun of me, I laughed, taking her into a bear hug. I love you, Mom. I love you more, my child. It was only later when I was alone that I realized how easy it was to talk to my mother. She covered years of distance in a minute. Eva, so how's it going with her? I asked cautiously. Ray's here a day early to help with the preparations. The gate of my house hasn't closed since yesterday, with people coming in and out continuously. Who? He asked, looking up from the bag full of grocery. Jean, I said, pretending to think was that her name. Oh, her. He suddenly looked nervous. She's kind of weird, he said after thinking for a moment. Weird? In a good way or bad? I don't know, he sighed, leaning against the kitchen counter. I did the same. She's nice, but she kind of overwhelms me. I raised a brow in question. You met her, he said. You tell me. If you are finally asking me, I would say that I'm wondering why you're still in contact with her. He looked shocked. I don't know if what I'm about to do will make me a bad person, but I want to make sure that Ray's not harmed. What? You think that I don't know that you asked her to pretend for a day? I raised a brow. He flushed. So why are you still in touch with her? Do you feel something for her? I crossed my finger a little bit. I questioned. Knew. He widened his eyes. Fine, he gave up. I promised her anything in return of her help. My heartbeat fastened. You stupid man, I yelled in panic. He was taken aback. What did she ask for? What's wrong with you? He looked confused. Nothing, I said calmly this time. What did she ask for? I repeated. He looked away and mumbled something. What? He glared at me. She wants me to finish your 10-date business with her. I sighed in relief. She said the people around her are really boring, so she wants me to entertain her when she sees fit. He blushed. A chuckle escaped me. Stop, he glared. It's embarrassing. I told you she's weird and really bossy. So, being the fair player that you are, Ray's goodness sure attracts shadows. I'm the biggest example of it. I assume you're going to keep your end of the deal. I suppose, he said, dejected. I'm never going to ever see her again after the payback is over. That didn't give me any relief. It won't be over until she says it's over. I sighed. What do you mean? He asked. Oops, I said that out loud. I mean, I talked to her in the washroom. She looks like someone who gets what she wants by any means, fair or not. She's basically the opposite of you. If she gets serious with you, you wouldn't find an escape. She'll have you if she wants you. She wouldn't go out with you just for fun. So end it before she takes a liking for you. If you don't like her, that is, I looked at him intently, if you want her, she can be the best thing that can happen to you. He looked pointedly. How would know so much about her? I looked around. I'm just stressed out, I guess. I'm taking my stress out on her. I'm sorry. Ignore me, I fumbled. He quickly placed his hands on the counter, caging me from both sides. Are you jealous? His eyes hopeful. No, I shook my head. It's not that, I swear. His face was inches away from me. I reflexively leaned back as his eyes hovered around my lips. He looked up, his gaze penetrating right through my eyes. He smirked darkly. You are afraid that I'll kiss you? My heart thudded hard as he placed a soft kiss on my forehead and moved away. You really are out of my reach now, Eva, he said before strolling out of the kitchen. My eyes followed him helplessly, but they widened in shock the next second. Liam was standing at the door, his eyes dark, his jaws clenched. Ray brushed past him. I stumbled, digging my hands on the counter behind me. I struggled for strength. My heart pounded loud in fear as he strode towards me. He stopped when he was as close as Ray was a moment ago. You were jealous, he said, looking into my eyes without any emotion, like he was giving me the weather forecast. I wasn't, I challenged, looking back. He chuckled humorlessly as he leaned into me. What are you doing? I was about to push him when he backed away on his own, a virgin white tissue now in his hand. Oh, he was reaching for the tissue box behind me. Are you okay? I asked. I don't want his wolf to create a scene here. Not when Ray was here. He brought the tissue to my face. He started scrubbing my forehead in a moment, he said. What are you doing? I tried to push him away, but of course he didn't move a muscle. You told me not to react in public, he said, wiping my temple with all his concentration. I held back in front of your human. You should allow my wolf some respite if you don't want me to show my ugly side to the world. He threw the tissue away after he was satisfied. You should have warned me that he was coming. He moved away. I breathed in relief. I'm sorry. I forgot. He nodded, looking away. Why are you here? I asked. Oh. He looked at me. Yes. He hesitated. Go on, I encouraged. He looked really nervous. Can I take Daniel to meet his brother today? Brother? I looked at him confused before realization dawned on me. My wolf stirred. Yes, I whispered. He would love to meet his elder brother, I managed to say. I could feel tears pricking the back of my eyes. Thank you, his voice filled with gratitude. A sigh escaped me as I watched him walk away. He stopped at the door. I cocked a brow as he turned and walked back to me. I widened my eyes as he dipped his head to quickly peck my temple. You reeked of him, he said before vanishing out of sight as I looked on. Thank you for watching. If you like our content, subscribe to our channel and unlock more surprises in the werewolf world.